Hello, welcome to the video. Hope you're having a great day. So I'm going to talk a little bit about several things actually. So there's a really good video that I came across that I highly recommend. I would love for you to watch. They basically piece together a chart. It's more of a vertical chart. Charts I make are more horizontal, but it's nice to see a vertical chart where somebody had invested the time and effort into that matches my conclusions as well. So this right here, what caught my eye. So the temple was destroyed in AD 70. Nobody disputes that, right? So right here, Jewish Christians extinct. Okay, that is the fulfillment of Matthew 23, 36, and 38. Okay, where Jesus said, "Truly I say to you," talking to the disciples, all these things will come upon this generation. It's not talk about a future generation. It's near demonstrative. This generation cannot be referring to a different generation. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, who killed the prophets, don't those who are sent to her. How often I want to gather your children together the way a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and we're unwilling. Now that is the gathering that took place. At this point, you're longing for it. And at the end of that generation, their gathering finally took place. Okay? And that's what so few Christians know about. So when Paul talked about the gathering in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, all it takes is seeing the phrase Christ coming, and people are thrown up. Oh, that hasn't happened yet. And they completely go off course, not realizing what it really meant by his coming in judgment. It's not a bodily return to the earth. So anyway, so Paul mentioned what had to happen before the gathering takes place. And so then it says here, "Behold, your house be left to you desolate." So that was fulfilled. That's what this is referring to right here. The house of Israel was extinct. Okay. Now, if that didn't happen, that would reduce Jesus to false prophet. And what's so interesting, let's look at another verse that points to this as well. Matthew 10:23. But whenever they persecute you, now you talk to the 12 apostles. Okay, they were apostles of Jews, not Gentiles. Paul and Barnabas, on the other hand, were apostles of Gentiles. Okay, so when he said the word "you" here, he's referring to a 12. Of course, Judas. He hung himself, and then Matthew took his place. So he would have joined them in the mission. Okay, this was later, but this was during his ministry. So he said, "But whenever they persecute you in one city, flee to the next. For I truly say to you, you will not finish going through the cities of Israel. The Son of Man comes." So the cities of Israel consisted of Jews in every nation. Okay, if you go to Acts 2:5. Now there were Jews living in Jerusalem, devout men from every nation under heaven. So this was during Pentecost, okay? So from every nation under heaven. So the writer of this, Luke, is a very intelligent man. When he said every nation under heaven, that means as far out as they possibly know, okay? Beyond the census, the Roman census, okay? It's far out as they know. Okay, entire Roman Empire plus. Okay, so they were given this mission, and they're not going to make it through until the Son of Man comes. So we look at this from a timeline perspective. Okay, so they started the mission here. They did not finish that mission until the sign of the Son of Man occurred in the sky on May 2nd of AD 66. Let's just zoom in a little bit here. So May 2nd, so this is 64, January. So but right here, where the sign occurred in the sky, May 2nd of AD 66, okay? Tacitus and Josephus were eyewitnesses of that. So you just click on this here, it gives you the source of that, okay? So that means that mission would have finished. Because you put yourself in their sandals, they knew they're not going to be able to finish that mission. So if there's a city where Jews withdrew, they're not going to go there. There's no point. Are you with me? If they're not going to make it through all the cities of Israel, and the Jews had evacuated a city such as Rome, they're not going to go there. Okay? So this is where it gets interesting. So there's an expulsion of Jews from Rome. Okay, this was around. It's the window of span based on the timing of Claudius when he was emperor. Okay, so they put the window of 8041 to 8053. What that suggested. Now think about it. Jesus told you you will not make it through all the cities of Israel, and you got a city where they expel from. That is, you're never going to make it that city. Because you don't make it to all the cities of Israel, you're not going to go there. Now you might be thinking, well, that'd be the last city to go to. No, they're not going to make it through all the cities of Israel, just like Jesus said. Think about that. Okay? So that means from this point forward, they would have not gone to Rome. I'm trying to share with you the biblical narrative here because, fortunately, and as I point out in some of my other videos, such Eusebius-Constantine Timeline, there's a period where there's burning of history, church history, burning of Jewish history, and rewriting of history here, okay? And that is a flood, a source of presupposition that has filled the minds of billions. Chances are you watching this video, you're a victim of that too. We've all been, okay? When you buy into the stuff written by Eusebius and the modifications have been done to church fathers. Now, I made videos on how easy it would have been to rewrite history in the 4th century, and it's surprisingly way easier than one thinks. Okay, way easier than I thought when I looked into this, okay? So when a person's mind's flooded with this idea of Peter with Rome being a bishop, overseer, or pope, and if you believe that to be true, you're naturally not going to see the biblical narrative of Peter. So anyway, continuing on, there was an expulsion of Jews right here, okay? They're not, from that point forward, they're not going to go to the cities of Israel, okay? Or to Rome. Think about that. If they fled, the Jews fled, there might be some Jews that might come back, true. But that's going to be the last city that's going to be on your mind. And chances are you're not going to go there because, like Jesus said, you will not make it through all the cities of Israel. So, is there a possibility prior to that they would have gone to Rome? Well, keep in mind, they were at the famine under Claudius that began right here in year 45. Okay? So, remember in John 21, Jesus told Peter, feed my sheep, shepherd my sheep, and then feed my sheep again. Okay, so it's feed, shepherd, feed. So the first time he says feed, it's more physical. And when it says shepherd, now we're getting more spiritual. And the last time he says feed, it's spiritual. So physical to spiritual. I believe that's what's going on there. Okay. So if he told that, do you think the 12 apostles, when there's a famine going on, they're just going to hang out in Rome? No. They're going to be fishing to feed the people, the Jewish people. Keep in mind, they were apostles of Jews, not Gentiles. So let's look at that. Let's look for that verse here. So 7 to 12. Okay. But on the contrary, as Paul, seeing that I had been entrusted with the gospel to the uncircumcised, to the Gentiles, just as Peter had been to the circumcised, for he who effectively worked for Peter in his apostleship to the circumcised effectively worked for me also to the Gentiles. Okay, so, and recognizing the grace that had been given to me, James and Cephas and John, who were reputed to be pillared, gave me and Barnabas the right hand of fellowship that we might go to the Gentiles and they be circumcised. So Barnabas joining Paul, being an apostle to the Gentiles. Okay. But when Cephas came to Antioch, I put him to faith because he could condemn for prior to coming of certain men from James. He used to eat with the Gentiles. That was Acts chapter 10. But when they came, began to withdraw and hold himself aloof, fearing the party of circumcision. So that was referring to it spread like wildfire amongst the Jews. They ate the Gentiles, because there was a fear of breaking the law with that. So we go to Acts chapter 10. Let's go there for a second here. Okay. Where Peter says in verse 28, you yourselves know how lawful it is for a man who's a Jew to associate with a foreigner, Gentile, or to visit him. And yet God has shown me that I should not call any man wholly unclean. So earlier on, he received that vision in this chapter, and don't call anything unclean that I call clean, okay? So the Gentiles were considered unclean. So this is now being introduced to Peter, this concept of the Gentile being made clean, okay? And so that's apparently what happened to Cornelius' household. They were made clean. And that's what allowed Peter to go to their household, share the gospel with them without breaking the law, okay? So, anyway, where was I? So anyway, and something else I want to point out here, if you notice the direction, keep in mind, Peter's on that mission, Matthew 10:23, going through the cities of Israel, okay? And so the Lord appeared to Cornelius, okay? And yeah, so now dispatch some men to Joppa and send for a man named Simon, Peter, who is also called Peter. He is staying as a tanner. Okay, so notice the direction here. The Lord telling Cornelius to go toward Peter. Okay, Peter is not going out to Gentiles. Okay, so notice that direction. And then if we go to the very next verse, or the next chapter, now the apostles and the brethren who were, remember Galatians chapter 2, I just read to you that Peter started withdrawing from the Jews when they were getting resistance, okay? Now the apostles and the brethren who were throughout Judea heard that the Gentiles had also received the word of God, okay? Going around, Peter ate with them, okay? And when Peter came to Jerusalem, those who were circumcised took issue with him, okay? So right away, he was getting resistance right away, right after he had that meal with Cornelius' household and shared the gospel with them. And remember what I read here. He began to withdraw himself, fearing the party of circumcision. Okay, so it started here. So in other words, he withdrew almost immediately. Okay, and according to law, I can't remember what it is, but if a Gentile comes to you as a Jew, okay, a Gentile comes to you, reaches out to you, you're supposed to accept them. Okay, but you can't reach out to them. That's kind of how it was. But now this all changed in Acts chapter 10 when they were God making them clean, okay? And so now they could, once they realized that, the prophecy, the promise gave Abraham that he'd be a father of many nations, that's now taking off now. That's now present reality. And that's why some of the Jews here were excited about this, okay, what happened in Acts chapter 10, okay? So it's in here somewhere, but they're all excited about that. So and then going back to what I was saying about the famine. Okay, now this is in September of AD 33, and then you hear about this famine. Do you think in Peter's mind he's going to just I'm going to take off to Rome? No. So right away. So Acts 10 is the very end of their mission in the stick of Judah, okay, which is where the Jews, okay, let's back up here. So Acts 10 occurred right here, okay. So they're preaching the gospel, the 12, Peter, the 12, not Paul, to the Jews, entirely Jews up to this point, okay. Then immediately he finds out about the famine I just read to you. He's not thinking of heading out to Rome. Okay? And then the famine begins in AD 45, and the expulsion of Jews from Rome. So what are the chances that Peter, according to biblical narrative, actually was an overseer, bishop, or pope in Rome? Now keep in mind, Jesus never gave Peter that role. Okay? That, again, based on presuppositions. What are the chances of Peter ever stepping foot of Rome with what I just shared with you? So you put yourself in the mind of Peter, what's going on, the mission that Jesus gave him, what was going on at the time, the famine. This is why it's so important to carefully piece together a timeline, piecing all this. Now, there was a period of time earlier on, I made a video where I said there's a possibility that Peter stepped foot in Rome, okay? But after I said that was a while ago, that was several months ago, I have looked into it more carefully, and the chances of Peter ever stepping in Rome is pretty much 0%. So all this about his grave, now think about that, 4th century, how would you even be able to identify his body? How do you know somebody just wrote on there Peter, and then, oh, look at this, everybody, oh, it's Peter, and then, oh, it must be Peter's body, and archaeologists weren't able to confirm it, and it just doesn't fit the biblical narrative at all. Again, the timing of all this just so happens at the same time to rewrite Jewish history, or church history took place. The destruction of Jewish history took place during this time. You got the book burnings. Let's see here. There's one source. There's another. So, so this book burning going on at the time. And it was when the bishops were involved, religious authorities, and pious laypersons, okay, imperial officials. So the church and state was involved with this, okay? Now, why would they do something like that? It's to rewrite church history. And again, if you watch my videos, there's 4 parts on how easy it would have been to rewrite church history in the 4th century. Again, it was way easier than I thought. Way easier than I thought. So continuing on the passages here, so we already looked at that. So something to consider too. Paul in Colossians 1:23 said, "If indeed you continue in the faith, firmly established and steadfast, and not moved away from the hope of the gospel that you have heard, which are proclaimed in all creation under heaven," okay, which I, Paul, made minister. Now, the only way he would know that, when he went back to Jerusalem, he would have been communicating with the other apostles. Where were they going, okay, to know that all claiming all creature under heaven, okay? Keep that in mind. Now, this was written around 80 to 64. And Romans 15, chapter 15, verse 20, Paul writes, "And thus I aspire to preach the gospel." Now, there are believers in Rome, okay? But keep in mind, go back to Acts 2, day of Pentecost, in the year 30, there are Jews living in Jerusalem, devout men for every nation under heaven, okay? So they would have been gone to Jerusalem, Pentecost, and heard the gospel there, and then gone back to Rome, or every nation under heaven, okay? Chances are Rome would be included. So that might explain why there were believers there, okay? But let's look at this carefully here. "And thus I aspire to preach the gospel, not where Christ was already named," to where he was named. So he was not named in Rome, but in Jerusalem, Pentecost, okay? "So that I would not build on another man's foundation." So, what are you referring to there? Okay, let's take a look at this here. Let's compare that to Ephesians 2:20. "Having been built on the foundation of the apostles," okay, "the prophet, and Christ Jesus himself being the cornerstone." So what does that tell you right here? At the time Paul wrote Romans, he did not believe that the original 12 apostles had been there. Otherwise, he would not have gone there. If they already went there, why would he go there? If they already went there, he'd be wasting his time and not being less efficient with Colossians 1:23, where the gospel has been proclaimed in all creation under heaven. Okay, they're not going to go to the same city. So if Peter or any apostle told Paul, "Hey, Paul, I've already been in Rome," Paul would not have written this letter. They're already there. He would not have written this verse right here, built on another man's foundation. So this suggests that the time Paul wrote this book of Romans, some people believe it was written around 80, 58. I believe a little later, probably around 63. So this suggests that Paul did not believe that. Now, again, if you go back to the timeline, okay, he preached the gospel to the Jews first, and finally, Acts 10, it started being introduced. And then right away, Peter withdrew from the Gentiles, right away. Started getting resistance, Acts chapter 11. And at the time Paul wrote Galatians chapter 2, he pointed out Peter had withdrawn from the Gentiles, okay? And right away, you hear about the famine. Now put yourself in it's in Acts chapter 11, put yourself in Peter's sandals. John 21, he told to shepherd them, okay? And here's this famine. He's not thinking, oh, I'm going to run off to Rome and abandon these people. No, he was going to fish and feed Jews from all over, okay? So, and that would have been in mind until finally it came to fruition, the famine. That started in AD 42 or 41. Okay. I'm going to click on the source here. Okay, yeah, it's in AD 41. Okay, that's when it began. So when you put yourself in the mind of Peter, what had been going through his mind, he withdrew, going through all the city of Israel, okay, did not make it through until the Son of Man comes. We know that the sign occurred in the year 8066. He'd been focused on the Jewish people and the stick of Judah first, with the Jews in Jerusalem. And then finally he started going out to the Gentiles with Acts 10. That would have meant to the Jewish people, oh, we can preach the gospel to the Gentiles, okay, without breaking the law, okay? And then right away he finds out about the famine, and he's not going to be fleeing to Rome, okay, or heading out to Rome. And then you have the famine actually begins, okay? He's not going to just take off on them. And then you have the expulsion of Jews, okay? That tells you right there, from that point on, if you understand Matthew 10:23, they would have not have gone to Rome from that point forward. It just not would have entered their minds. Okay? So all this writing about Peter being in Rome, that's all modification in the 4th century under Eusebius, and I'm sure other people too. I believe it didn't stop with Eusebius, but I believe that stopped in the 4th century, though. Eventually, they're rewriting history. For one thing, we have the Council of Sardica, which is in the year 342, where the emperor had the final authority over doctrinal matters. That tells you that there was no papacy at that time. Okay, and so happens years later. 384. So 42 years later, the first person in history refers to himself Pope, and that was Saint Syracuse. Okay, coincidence? No. So anyway, and then they had to rewrite history to make it all look natural. Oh, there's been a pope all along, and when they point out Peter being a pope, you're going against what the mission that was given to him by Jesus, and Jesus never told him to be a pope or bishop or an overseer. So anyway, so I think I make my point here. The point is, you look at the biblical narrative carefully, piece it together, put yourself in Peter's mind, what's going on at the time. There's a lot more too. I mean, you got the destruction of the temple. You read his letters. He's writing. You understand from a Jewish perspective. Keep in mind, he's the apostle of Jews. I already pointed out. He's writing to the Jewish Christians, and when you look at it from their perspective, it really unfolds what his intent was in his text. Too many people today, they read it more from a Gentile perspective. They completely miss what is going on in his epistles. So anyway, I'll just leave it at that. yeah, so I'll try to have these resources in the description below. You can have access to all of it. So anyway, thank you very much for watching, and hope you have a great day.